total opposite of the word zen. Hello and thank you for clicking on this video. I'll be talking about the Zen Air DAC and the Zen Air CAN. The Zen Air DAC is an all-in-one DAC amp unit coming in at $99 US, and the Zen Air CAN is an amplifier also coming in at $99 US. And together, like a Megazord, they form the Zen Air Stack. Before we explore deeper, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank iFi Audio for sending these units in exchange for my honest opinion. However, as always, all thoughts and opinions are my own and are not influenced by any parties. Before we talk about unboxing, if you've been enjoying my content, do consider hitting that like and subscribe button. That'll help the channel a lot and I do appreciate it. Now let's talk unboxing very briefly. For the Zen Air DAC, it comes with a USB to USB-A cable, and this unit can be powered via USB. There's a sticker to solidify your brand loyalty and the unit itself. It's a similar unboxing experience for the Zen Air CAN, but instead of a USB to USB-A cable, you get a USB to power cable. There are no other cables available to connect between the two, which I wish would have come included in the Zen Air CAN at least, but for this price it's not much of a complaint. Let's talk about the design. They both carry the same design language. There's this curvature from the side so that when you stack them, it doesn't look like your typical box on box stack, and I'm not sure if this design choice does anything practically, but as long as it doesn't affect its functionality, it's still a nice design choice to stand out from the norm. They both have the same crosshatch pattern on the plastic surface surrounding the entire body with the iFi logo at the top. They both come with this brass colored looking knob in the middle with the circular indent for volume indication. The only big difference aside from what's on the face is that the iFi Air DAC is of a lighter grey color for its body and the Zen Air CAN is a darker grey. So for nitpicks, there is one small nitpick for this design. So if you're putting either of these units hard up against the surface, the knob is simply too big and doesn't give you the space to fully turn it around. It's fine when you have it as a stack and you just place the unit you prefer on a higher surface. Otherwise, if you're simply using the Zen Air DAC, then you'd have to elevate it in order to have that ease of turning the knob. It also doesn't help if you have your headphones plugged in. It limits that knob turning even further. It's a small nitpick, but it would definitely help with its convenience had they shift the headphones inputs a little further away or have the knobs on the sides or something. Product beauty is nice to have, but it's pointless if it hinders convenience. I should put that on the t-shirt. Also on the Zen Air CAN, when you're turning off the X bass and X space feature, there's this split second loudness. It's like those audio units when you're turning off an electronic and it has a pop. It's almost like that, but instead of a pop, it just had that split second where music becomes loud and then back to normal. It has that pop when you're turning off the X bass plus on the Zen Air DAC when you connect to it. Not a nitpick per se, but something to note. For features, so this is the start of where it truly separates between the two. Starting with the iFi Zen Air DAC, on the front you have a power match button which apparently toggles between the gain setting for the amplifier. Since this is a DAC amp all-in-one, you've got a 6.4mm single-ended output at the front and an X bass plus button. At the back you've got an USB-A input, a separate input for power, and an RCA output. As mentioned earlier, you can power the Zen Air DAC by plugging in the USB cable, and you do not need a power cable, but I guess if you wanted to give it a bit more juice, you can always do so. For the Zen Air CAN, at the front you've got a dedicated on-off power button, a button to toggle between the three available inputs, a dedicated gain button, a single-ended 6.4mm output, a 4.4mm balanced output, and a dedicated button for X bass plus and X space. At the back you've got a dedicated input for power and three separate inputs, two pair of RCA inputs and one 3.5mm input. The good thing is that you can power the Zen Air CAN from the power cable through a USB port rather than requiring a dedicated outlet. For power, so testing these units power using my HiFiMan HE1000V2, which is a full-sized planar magnetic headphone on the 6.4mm termination. On the Zen Air DAC, I need to be on maximum on the volume knob and it's still not quite reaching to my usual levels. Turning on the power match feature, my volume knob would be on the 3 o'clock position, and it does give the HE1000V2 a bit of headroom. If I'm pairing with the Zen Air Can and connected to that unit instead of the Air DAC, both knobs would affect the level of available volume for your gears. But again, despite both on the maximum on the volume knob, it gets me to a sufficient volume level, but I'm always left wanting more. So I ended up having to use the gain setting on the Zen Air Can. So with the volume knob on the 3 o'clock position without power match on the Zen Air DAC, toggling the 9 dB gain setting on the Zen Air Can, I'd be on the same 3 o'clock position on the volume knob for the Zen Air Can, which would be similar to the Zen Air DAC with the power match on. On the 18 dB gain, I can push my volume knob back another quarter, so it'll be at the 12 o'clock position. The power match on the Zen Air DAC also adds the additional headroom when you're connected to the Zen Air Can, and essentially with the gain setting on maximum, which is the 18 dB setting, and the power match on, the volume knobs on both units can be at 12 o'clock position, and that as a whole was sufficient to give the HE1000V2 a good level of sound with plenty headroom space. My preference is having both knobs turned to the 1 to 2 o'clock position, having no gain setting on the Zen Air Can, and simply turning on power match on the Zen Air DAC. It also helps with making it easier to play around without having the risk of you going deaf sooner. Speaking of which, one thing to note, however, and this is important, is to remember to turn your volume knob backwards first, making the volume softer before you toggle your gain setting, because it's quite a significant jump in volume between the gain settings. So if you made the same mistakes as I did of toggling the buttons freely, your ears will be smacked by the music, and not in a good way. So for sound, let's talk about what the X-Bass and X-Space feature does to the sound coming from your gears, because it's a different implementation of X-Bass from the two units. On the Zen Air DAC, once you hit that X-Bass Plus, bass will come in heavy and thick, almost to a fault. Just doing a quick simple test hooking up the Zen Air DAC to my speakers so you can listen to the difference in the bass. However, for me personally, I feel it's pushed a little too far, even for headphones like the HE1000V2, which has a really tight and controlled bass presentation. And even though I love my bass, I wouldn't turn the X-Bass Plus on the Zen Air DAC. I'd be pairing this feature with headphones that have very little bass presentation. Something like the Sennheiser HD600 comes to mind, but of course, having that much bass without the elevated treble might impact in its overall sound performance, but the feature is there if you need it. On the Zen Air Can, however, is the total opposite, where the X-Bass feature is a lot more controlled, just slightly elevated just to give it a bit more note weight, a bit more warmth, and it's definitely one that I prefer over the X-Bass on the Zen Air DAC. However, you can actually stack the X-Bass feature, so if you're going for all out bass galore, then turn on both the X-Bass features and off you go, bopping your head till your hair falls out completely. There's also the X-Bass feature, which is of a similar presentation as the Neo IDSD2, where the mid-range is pushed back a little to create that sense of space, but it can cause the overall sound to sound a little thin in comparison. There is an option to turn both the X-Bass and X-Bass feature on, but as with the Neo IDSD2, I only use the X-Bass feature on really forward sounding presentations, and recently I found it best on something like the Aiko OH10s. So just comparing this quickly to other stacks, so the only real comparison I have with the Zen Air stack will be another budget stack coming from Schiit Audio, the Schiit Magni and Modi. This was my first ever stack when I got into the hobby. It's a relatively budget stack from Schiit Audio, but it definitely doesn't sound like shit. I'm sure that joke was made 1,000 times, so let's add that to the list. However, compared to the Zen Air stack, there just wasn't enough power to drive the HE1000V2, nor give it enough headroom, and it was a pretty straightforward plug and play stack. So you don't have a lot of features, and it comes in slightly more expensive than the Zen Air stack, which is why I sold the Schiit Stack shortly after, but if I had to compare between the two, I'd personally go with the Zen Air Stack, and it has a lot more features than the Schiit Stack. If anyone is curious about how this compares to something like the HiFiMan EF400 or even the more expensive Topping Stack, which is about 10 times the price, there really is no question that the Topping Stack or the HiFiMan EF400 is simply more powerful and offers a lot more features than the Zen Air Stack. Having said that, for a budget stack, the Zen Air Stack offers more than you need for about 80 to 85% of your headphones or IEMs, especially when you're starting out and are looking for budget options to power your gears, unless you're already purchasing a Susvara or really power hungry gears on your first go. Also, the X-Bass and X-Space features are another unique offering that is only available to iFi Audio products from a recent memory, so that's another thing to consider. So going up against something from the same family but of a higher price, the Neo IDSD2, which I have a dedicated video if you want to know more about this unit. Essentially, what you're getting with the Neo IDSD2 is more power, a few more additional features, for example the Bluetooth feature, and the X-Bass implementation is a middle child between the Zen Air Can and the Zen Air DAC, where it's more controlled than the Zen Air DAC, but it has a bit more bass than the Zen Air Can. So you are getting a bit more feature and power, but of course, whether or not paying 5 times the price is justified will be up to you and your financial situation. On the flip side, the Zen Air Stack is definitely much more portable and it can be powered via USB, which is definitely more convenient than the Neo IDSD2, as that requires a dedicated outlet. So to sum it all up, for anyone looking to start their audiophile journey and are looking for a budget option to power their gears, I think the Zen Air Stack, comprising of the Zen Air DAC and the Zen Air Can, is the stack to beat. It just offers a lot more for an affordable price package that should cover you for a very long time until the next big upgrade. And even if you do get an upgrade, it's still something worth having on your desk, or if you need a portable stack, it doesn't get any better than this. And with that all said, thank you once again to iFi Audio for this experience and to all of you for watching. Do let me know your favorite budget stack combo in the comment section down below. And until the next video, happy listening.